Have you ever had that issue or that problem that you are trying to figure out or identify or fix the problem, and you can't get to it, or it's not being working, and so you got to take a flashlight and you shine the light on it, and once you shine the light on it, then you can identify it, then you can see it clearly and take care of the problem. Otherwise, you look like a fool, or it never gets done. It's interesting. Paul says in Ephesians chapter 5, starting with verse 11, he says, "Take no part in the worthless deeds of the evil and darkness. Instead, expose them. It is shameful even to talk about the things that ungodly people do in secret, but their evil intentions will be exposed when the light shines on them. For the light makes everything visible." It's interesting. Sin loves to hang out in the corner, or evil will creep around, and until it's identified, until the truth of the gospel, until the truth of God shines in it, it just continues to grow, and we have no power over it. And that's even if you think about, I love the story of Jesus when he's about to call out the demon or the legion, and he asks their name, which is interesting. And you come to find out that he was asking their name because back then when you knew someone's name, you almost had a sense of power over them. And so he calls their name to identify them, to call them out, and then be able to cast them out of that man because he had the authority over them. Same thing with evil. When we allow the light and the truth of the gospel to pierce the darkness and identify something, it loses its authority and power over us, and then we can work on it because it's been identified, and then through the power of the Holy Spirit we can eradicate it. Now, over the past week, I have seen images of a sense of evil that continues to fester and affect us, and that's racism. And I know this gets to be whether some of us think, oh, this makes me feel uncomfortable, or we just don't even want to identify it, or we don't even want to deal with it. But the reality is it's a sin, and it's an evil that causes injustice and hatred that works trying to rip us apart. And not just that, but there's something that it's fed by, and I know that as a white male that I often get uncomfortable or used to, and that's the reality of that phrase, white privilege, that understanding that from the very beginning, that there's that sense because of slavery, because of the treatment that's been bred in, that white privilege is a reality that our brothers and sisters of color have to deal with. And we cannot continue to just ignore it, be uncomfortable by it, because when we do, it sits in the corner and grows and festers. And we see the result of it over the past, not just week. The horrific thing is that it's been many months now. It's been years. The list goes on and on of black men that have died, black women that have died. We see not just that, but we've seen the stories coming from the reservations of people of color, indigenous people that have died, or as a result of white privilege, of racism. And we cannot choose to ignore this anymore, church. Because it's that sin that's festering. And what we must do is take the truth of the gospel and shine God's light upon it and allow it to be exposed, identified, and through the power of the Holy Spirit, we can eradicate it, because that is the power that we have as believers, because that crap is not from God. It is from Satan himself. It's evil. And until we're willing to expose it, it will continue to grow. And we know that as kingdom people, we are called to step up and fight those injustices. And the only way that we do it is by taking the truth of the gospel and shining light on it, calling out for what it is, and then working together to eradicate it. It's uncomfortable. But you know what's interesting? the more we talk through it, the more we're willing to identify, the more we even begin, as Curtis said on Wednesday, recognize that there are systems in place that work against human beings, not just human beings, but men and women of color. Until we recognize it, we continue to allow it to grow. But when we recognize it, when we shine God's truth on it as the gospel-driven people, it will be exposed. And the more we talk about it, the more we have control over it, and the more we can work to eradicate it. It doesn't hold this taboo feeling on us, making us uncomfortable anymore, but we have the power of God in us to eradicate it. This is what being kingdom people is all about. The tomb is empty, remember. Christ came, lived, showed us how to live, showed us how to treat others, and he lived it out. He went to the cross, he rose from the dead, so that we could eradicate these evils. And it begins with taking the truth of the gospel, just like that flashlight, and shining it right on that issue, being willing to talk about it. Be willing to be aware of it and stand up against the systems, against the language of racism. Because that is what it means to be a follower of God. And as we do that, we walk and live in unison with Christ our King. It's a difficult task, but by the power of the Holy Spirit, we will do it. Let's not be afraid anymore. Let's not be uncomfortable anymore, but let's expose it by the truth of the gospel so that we don't have to read and hear these stories anymore. That our brothers and sisters of color, of different cultures, do not have to live in fear for taking a run, for going down the street, for whatever it is. That's not the way that life that God intended. And it begins with us exposing those unjust, evil, racist, white privilege ideas and allowing the power of the Spirit in us to eradicate it. Have a good weekend.